The sun, gently dropping behind the hills in the Chihuahuan Desert, brings into focus the rugged and unforgiving landscape of West Texas. Here, the Pecos River winds its way through the granite canyons. Listen, you can hear the mystical Native American music echoing through rock shelters carved in the canyon walls. Inside those shelters, yellow and red pictographs painted thousands of years ago by hunter-gatherers who traveled between what is now Texas and Mexico. Further south and west, the Rio Grande runs through Terrell County, Texas, on the border with Mexico.
You know, this is a beautiful part of Texas, of the United States. You know, you've heard of Big Bend National Park, which is a beautiful desert national park. This is the lower canyons of the Big Bend and of the Rio Grande, and I'll tell you what, it's really phenomenal. You know, my heart's here. Anytime I come along this river, I just sit and take it all in.
Sheriff Thaddeus Cleveland has spent much of his life here, 26 years with Border Patrol, and now as county sheriff. Sanderson, population 690, give or take, is the only town in a ranching county of 1.5 million acres. There's not much crime in Terrell County, says the sheriff. Much of what he and his deputies do is work with state and federal law enforcement, apprehending migrants crossing from Mexico.
This isn't easy. Not everybody is as fortunate as we are to see this, because it's so hard to get here. Yet, this is an area of the state of Texas, not this particular spot, but in general, where people are trying to cross the border. And that's Mexico right there.
It certainly is. And first of all, you make a great point. Not many Americans get to actually come to this portion or any portion of our border here in Terrell County. One, because of course it's privately owned, but also because of the ruggedness and the time it takes to get down here. But yes, there's probably been more illegal aliens here than there has been Americans here that exploit this portion of the border to make their entry in the United States.
Today is a far cry from the ancient times when those hunter-gatherers crossed the Rio freely. There is no free pass now. But here in Terrell County, the migrant story is very different from much of the Texas border, including Eagle Pass, east of here, where in late 2023, we saw thousands of people crossing the Rio Grande every week. Here in Terrell County, the number is only about 1,000 people a year.
Obviously, you can tell we don't need a border wall. We have a God-made boundary, right?
The sheriff's social media pages are filled with pictures of those small groups of migrants caught in this brutal cactus-filled desert. At least a 2-day walk to any civilization.
You know, what do people think once they've crossed that river, they've stepped on U.S. soil? What's their next thought, you know? Do they think that they've made it? Do they realize how much further they have to walk? Do they realize the dangers they'll be, presented with, whether it's the heat, the cold, along the entire 2,000-mile border with Mexico and the United States? Terrell County, the Big Bend region is definitely that, the roughest, toughest, and most unforgiving.
En este día tan especial.
This is a snapshot of the Texas border in the last months before the Trump administration took over. With all the news of express deportations, the number of migrant crossings is down from historic highs, but not completely shut down.
You can see where they've been crawling over it.
It should have a perfect square. That piece of barbed wire used to be on top.
Cody Carruthers Ranch is massive. Much of it borders the Rio. We drove with Carruthers along a few miles of fence line.
They don't like to come over the top of this fence because they'll silhouette. And if the Border Patrol's sitting up there on the highway with those high-dollar cameras, they pick them up, I assume, and so that's why they're cutting underneath.
Every few weeks, Carruthers finds another spot in his fence where migrants have cut through. That's not all we saw out here. The Carruthers Ranch is 17,000 acres, 13 miles of fencing, and this is some of the most unforgiving land you'll ever find. So it is amazing when you look out here on the other side of this fence
And what do you see? Migrant backpacks left behind.
No one could tell you whether the migrants who came through here were picked up by authorities, eluded capture, or perished. Many have. Cody's wife is County Judge Dale Carruthers.
The terrain is so, I don't want to say treacherous, but it's
vast.
Yeah, it's vast.
And, you know, in Terrell County, on average, you're talking about the history of us here, within an average of 7 years, we might have had 5 people perish due to the elements in that 7-year span. But since 21, we're roughly at about 37 that have perished due to the elements that they shouldn't even be in.
We actually, a few years ago, had a snowstorm that came through, and I think total we lost about 5. I went out and assisted with 3 deceased individuals.
Both Sheriff Cleveland and Judge Carruthers credit Operation Lone Star for the drop in migrant crossings. That's a joint undertaking between the Texas Department of Public Safety, DPS, and the state's National Guard. That's costing the state $2.5 million a week.
It gave us a new fleet, which desperately needed. Our county is a poor county. We can't afford to buy new vehicles.
Right.
It's paid for 2 additional deputies. So our county, to my position and 2 other deputies is what it funds. So we've hired 2 full-time deputies and 2 part-time. Equipment, overtime, almost anything you can think of, it's funded for us.
The money spent in Terrell County is an example of how Operation Lone Star has funded additional equipment and personnel for police and military all along the Texas border. The result? According to the DPS, there has been a 74% drop in illegal crossings since Lone Star began in 2021.
There has to be, in your opinion, control over what's going on.
Absolutely, absolutely. There has to be. It's going to exhaust all resources across the board. Like as far as legal fees, you know, the mandated, in anything that's unfunded mandates, housing them, medical, food, when they're in the jail system, comes from the taxpayer.